Hello everyone, my name is August. And let me ask you something. Do you like horror? Particularly the cosmic kind of horror that eats at the back of your mind and drives insane fears into your heart. Let me ask you another question. Do you like video games? Particularly incredibly hard strategy ones that will have you biting your nails on the edge of your seat from the intensity. Well, what if I told you there was a game that blended the dark fantasy cosmic horror genre with tough as nails tactical combat? That is right, this game called League of Legends. And also Darkest Dungeon.
Continue the onslaught. Destroy them all.
Darkest Dungeon is a grim video game where you take control of a ragtag group of heroes and send them into the deepest, darkest pits of hell to try and save the world from certain destruction. It is a ruthless, unforgiving strategy game that deals with both the sanity of yourself as well as the poor souls that you are going to be sending out to try and defeat the Darkest Dungeon. And today, I'm going to be telling you how Darkest Dungeon blends all these aspects of horror and gaming to make an unforgettable, brutal experience. Disclaimer, I will only be really discussing Darkest Dungeon 1. Darkest Dungeon 2 is out right now, but it is in the early phases. It's basically in beta, so I would like to wait for the entire game to come out before I go ahead and make a video on it. But with that being said, let's jump right into Darkest Dungeon and explaining why it is such a great game with part 1, the setting and the art style. At the beginning of this game, you receive a letter from your long-lost ancestor who tells you that you have inherited his manor and you must help him finish what he started and save the world from certain destruction from an evil entity in the dark. You arrive at this little hamlet and get to work hiring bleak, downtrodden adventurers to try and save your estate and the world. Now, right off the bat, you will notice the unique and incredible art style this game has. It is oddly chibi in some of its aspects. A lot of the characters and monsters look slightly cartoonish with really large, exaggerated features. But this more cartoony, chibi style doesn't take away from the game's dark tones at all. The characters are drawn with these thick, dark, heavy lines that give them a lot of weight and shadow, making them pop against the background. Also, a lot of these heroes are drawn to look very dirty or raggedy, further selling that these aren't really noble heroes, but more downtrodden individuals and mercenaries working for coin. And the places you visit are strange and off-putting, full of rotting corpses and twisted fauna, and the sound design in this game is divine. Oh, and so is the music. One of the main story points I love about Darkest Dungeon is how these characters are set up. You see, these aren't good people that you're hiring. In fact, most of them, if not all of them, have seen or committed some horrible atrocity and are actively here to try and gain some amount of penance. The Crusader, for example, is a holy knight that uses the light to heal his allies and smite his enemies. But he has a super traumatic past, where he suffered PTSD and probably committed war crimes during his service days, and now he can't even go back to his family because he's so ashamed. Or the Highwayman, who is your standard kind of bandit crook, who accidentally shot and killed a woman and her child during a stagecoach robbery, causing him an intense amount of grief and guilt. These characters add a lot of flavor to the world and further drive this dark, grim fantasy setting of Darkest Dungeon, and really adds to their potential triumphs later down the line. This game does a lot of good with setting up this world. It's dark, it's gloomy, it's sad. And honestly, the cartoonish art style kind of helps sell that more in a weird way, as everything looks a little bit more off and creepy with this sort of art style. But with all that being said, with the great art style and sound design, let's move on into the main portion of this video, part 2, the combat and the enemy design. Now, with such a horrific art style and setting, you'd expect this game to be pretty hard. And you'd be right. Darkest Dungeon is a turn-based strategy game where you have control of a party of 4 heroes to explore a dungeon with. Dungeons are broken up into different regions on the estate. You have the undead-infested ruins, the dank dark cove, the smelly rotting warrens, the fungi-infested weld, and the Crimson Court DLC added the blood-soaked courtyard. Each of these different areas have different enemies you will fight, as well as specific obstacles you can run into. Now, before you can explore these dungeons, you gotta prep for them. You will need to bring food, bandages, anti-venom, shovels, and oh my god, do not forget the torches. These items will be used on your excursion into one of these dungeons, so make sure you stock up, but not too much, as you want to keep inventory space open for all the sweet loot and treasure you're gonna find down there. Now, you've started your excursion, and the first thing you will notice is the torch at the top of your screen. And basically, you need to keep this torch nice and bright using the torch item you bought back in the store. Now, you don't need the torch lit to win a dungeon, but it makes your life a hell of a lot easier, as it gives your characters buffs, and at brighter light levels, it is less likely for enemies to ambush you. And at lower light levels, or if you're in pitch darkness, enemies will get buffs or have a much higher chance to ambush your party. Maintaining the torch's light level is important, but so is watching your surroundings as you explore the dungeon, as you will find plenty of traps, path-blocking rubble, and curios to slow your exploration. Again, you will use some of the items you buy back in the shop to overcome these obstacles. Also, your heroes will experience hunger as you explore, and you will need to feed them with food. Otherwise, they will suffer the pain of starvation, and it is not a pretty sight. And then we get into the biggest part of Darkest Dungeon's gameplay, the combat. Darkest Dungeon is, again, a turn-based strategy game where your party will go, and then the enemy's party will go, and you both take turns fighting each other in combat. Each character you have has special abilities and rules based off of their class. There are a total of 17 classes in the game to pick from, and each one has very unique skills and gameplay options for you to use. All of these different characters' strengths and weaknesses will require you to form a nice cohesive party to delve into a dungeon. Although there will be plenty of times where you will have a strained barracks, which means you may need to mix and match and make a less but optimal party to delve into a dungeon, but sometimes you just have to roll with what you got. There are some heroes, like the Crusader or the Hellion, that are great frontline fighters that like to be up at the front of the party wading into the enemies with their great weapons. While other heroes, like the Vestal or the Antiquarian, are better set in the back of the group, providing heals and buffs to the party. While other heroes are more of a mix of a frontline fighter and a backline support that can kind of be anywhere in the party's position and still be effective, like the Highwayman or the Bounty Hunter. But the greatest thing about Darkest Dungeon's combat is all of these characters have so many cool interactions, abilities, and teamwork plays that you can really make some quite unique and different parties. And it's really fun and rewarding to find all these cool combos and tactics you can use during a dungeon exploration mission. Now, whatever party you make, you better make sure it's a good one, because you will be facing some absolutely terrifying enemies in this game. Enemies in Darkest Dungeon hit pretty damn hard, and a lot of them are faster than you at the start of the game. This will require you to make spur-of-the-moment decisions on who is the primary enemy to take out during combat. Now, when a hero is dropped to 0 HP, they don't die instantly. Instead, they are put on something called Death's Door, where at this point, any amount of damage can kill them based on a random % chance, but they can still be healed and brought back to the brink. Now, even if your hero is healed and brought back from the brink, they will still suffer a permanent debuff for the rest of the dungeon, so it is in your best interest to keep your heroes nice and healthy. However, some, if not most of the enemies in this game, don't just hurt you with raw damage. Some will poison you, others will stun you, or make you bleed, or give you some horrible disease, or, worst case, cause stress damage. This brings me to the most unique and aggravating mechanic in Darkest Dungeon, the stress meter. You can see that each hero has a stress bar indicated by this, bar. And whenever a hero gets hit, or fails to disarm a trap, or doesn't get fed, or just had a really, really bad day and woke up on the wrong side of the bed, they will suffer stress. Once a hero's stress bar fills to 100%, one of two things will happen. The first, and more likely outcome, is the hero will go mad and become afflicted, losing their sanity to the madness of the dungeon. Afflicted heroes are wildly unpredictable and throw a major wrench into your plan. They can skip their turns, or they can attack their friends, or they can say some crazy batshit insane thing that raises everyone else's stress. And if the bar reaches 100% again,
As life ebbs,
yeah, a heart attack, which instantly drops your hero to 0 HP and puts them on death's door. Now, the second outcome is your hero goes virtuous, which is the exact opposite of getting afflicted. The hero will show immense bravery and courage and set their bar back to 0 and also gain a buff of some sort. They will also now say rallying speeches that can lower the other hero's stress, too. Now, the second option of your hero going virtuous is very rare, and it is more likely that your hero is going to get afflicted. There are special trinkets or skills that you can use to try and raise a hero's chance to go virtuous, but overall, it's very rare, and it is in your best interest to keep your hero's stress bars low. How do you decrease stress? Well, there's multiple different ways you can keep a hero's stress bar low. There are certain skills you can use, there are certain curios that you can do, or there's also the camping mechanic, where your party has a nice rest on longer dungeons, and that can help reduce stress as well. This stress mechanic is such a great thing in the most horrible way. In my opinion, this is what really sells that horror aspect of Darkest Dungeon and ties it in beautifully with the gameplay. You have all these horrible eldritch abominations attacking you, so of course your heroes are going to get stressed out and freak out in the moment. And I do believe that this whole affliction mechanic, while it is incredibly aggravating and can lead to some pretty horrible situations, it is super thematic and, in my opinion, very, very realistic for a setting like this. Now, back to the enemies real quick. We have some very inspired designs. You got your classic skeleton warriors, but you also have fish people, pig people, mosquito people, men people, whatever the hell this thing is. Lots of really cool enemy designs, and they have some very different nightmarish abilities to cause you and your entire party stress. Oh boy. And the bosses are just so cool in this game. I mean, just look at these guys. These are some cool bosses. I'm not going to go too much into them, but the bosses in this game are great. Except for the Sunken Crew. Fuck that boss. I hate that boss. Final thing I want to touch on with gameplay are the quirks and trinkets you will gain after you complete a dungeon. Your heroes will gain quirks after a mission, and sometimes these can be good or bad. Sometimes your hero will get a quirk that lets them do more damage or makes them more accurate during combat, and Other times, your hero may gain a quirk that causes them to get stressed out faster, or gives them a tapeworm. So it's really hit or miss, and from my experience, it's completely random if your hero gets a good quirk or a bad quirk. Also, your heroes save any stress they accumulated on the mission when they go back to the hamlet. But don't worry, there are certain buildings, like the bar and the church, that your heroes can go to relieve themselves of that stress. Also, there is a hospital, so if your character has a particularly bad negative quirk or a really horrible disease, you can just send them to the hospital and they'll get nice and stabbed up and ready to go back into the battlefield. And finally, the trinkets. These are nice little items that you can gain randomly on missions, or you get them as rewards for completing missions. Usually these trinkets help boost your character's performance in the form of stat increases. And these trinkets help further along class builds and party strategies. And it's really fun to mix and match different trinkets with different characters and get nice little bonuses here or there. So, I've talked about the great art style and setting of this game, as well as the phenomenal music. This game really has a great, dark, cosmic feel to it. And I've also talked about how great the combat is. It's hard, it's stressful, and it really adds to the overall feel of Darkest Dungeon and further tying in that horror feel and mechanic to the game. Now, all that being said, there is one more thing that further ties this game together and just wraps it up in a nice little horror bow. The Ancestor, or the Narrator.
And now the true test. Hold fast or expire.
Darkest Dungeon wouldn't be Darkest Dungeon without the Narrator Ancestor. You may have heard him occasionally throughout this video. This guy, voiced by Wayne June, is the icing on the horror cake that is this game. Thank God he is in the second game. His intimidating but almost soothing voice adds to the amazing feel of this game. There is nothing more satisfying than smacking a big-ass monster with a fat crit and hearing,
"As the fiend falls, a faint hope blossoms."
or nothing more disheartening than you getting your teeth kicked in by the most horrific monster you've ever seen in your life and hearing,
"Such a terrible assault cannot be left unanswered."
Not only that, but he's incorporated so well into this world, and he slowly feeds you bits of lore and information about what you're doing and who you're fighting. He also further boosts your confidence on missions. When you're doing poorly or when you're doing bad, he'll tell you that it's okay and to, keep going and keep fighting. And he also makes sure that you don't get a little too over eager or ahead of yourself, as if you're doing a little too well, he may say some things like,
"A trifling victory, but a victory nonetheless."
Wayne June's performance as the Ancestor really sells this game for me. He is the perfect narrator for this kind of world, and his delivery of the lines has never gotten old, even after over 100 hours of playtime. In fact, I'm gonna play some of his voice lines right now, just so you understand how good he is.
Press this advantage. Give them no quarter. Annihilated. The slow death. Unforeseen. Unforgiving.
So, that's it. That's why I love Darkest Dungeon so much, and why I believe it is the perfect blend of cosmic horror and strategy gaming. And I recommend all of you that like hard, challenging strategy games to go out and play it, even if it is definitely going to cause you a lot of rage. And like I said earlier in this video, I will be making a Darkest Dungeon 2 video at some point, just not right now. I also wanted to say thank you all so much for the support on the channel. I'm definitely trying to go down a more professional, thought-out path with the videos I upload, but I do want to still upload the regular gameplay videos, as they're a lot of fun, and they're easier to make, and I still get a lot of enjoyment out of making those videos. That being said, thank you all so much for watching. My name is August. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like the video. And remember,
Remind yourself that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer.